All right, we're ready.
Okay, it is 2:02, and we are here to interview applicants for a replacement assessor. So, Dan Rose, you want to go first? Tell us about yourself. Make your best sales pitch.
Okay, so I've been a resident of the community since 2014. I've been involved in community affairs as well as local politics. I'm the only candidate in this pool that is an elected official, both of the Central Committee and of the Tenderley Hospital District. I've had quite an experience with the people in this building. The assessor's office I've had a lot of experience with. And so I know a fair amount of what they do there. I know where their authority comes from, and I know what their job is. I've challenged that job as well, all the way up to the State Tax Commission, and reasonably doing so. And so I've seen many aspects of it for this job, and will provide to the assessor's office a style of fair but firm management practice.
Mr. Brown?
Hi, how are you?
How are you?
I'm Thomas Brown. I have been a resident as well since 2014 in the area here. I offer a real estate background. I've been involved in real estate in multiple capacities since 1996, as far as leasing, sales, resales, property management. I spent 13 years working with the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy managing on-base housing at Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington State, and then 3 different bases down in California for the Navy. I have managed large teams of people, up to 265 personnel at a time, multi-site operations. I threw my name in the hat into this position because I think that as being part of the community, there is a certain responsibility that I think comes with being a citizen. I think there's more than just living in the community. I think if you can take an active role to help manage the process and try to promote good citizenship and make the community a stronger and more fair thing for everybody, I think that's a positive thing. I'm not going to go with the Sheriff's Department or maybe a captain for the Priest River area. Again, all those monthly meetings and the volunteer for all of the events that are required for us. And ones that vessel priest and Sandpoint will be part of it as well. So we're engaged with the community. I think with my business background, I can add value to the team here. My management style is one of inclusion. I believe that you need to offer your team respect and build on that respect to build trust and loyalty. Turn teams around that were not producing and been able to make them become part of a larger team that they felt was bigger than just themselves, where we could actually get things done and face challenges and take on huge responsibilities. I've worked with base commanders, I've worked with generals, Secretary of the Army. So I bring all that experience with me as far as the business background goes. I think I work well with people, and I'd welcome the opportunity to serve. I think there's value in that. We all get to a time in our life where we work for our professional careers, and then there's a time to give back. So I value the opportunity, and I think that's a figure with that, and see that give it a shot, and I'd be happy to serve. Thank you.
Mr. Eaglehart.
Thanks for the opportunity. My wife and I have been residents for 19 years. We've owned property for 22 years up here. We have 6 children, 9 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. I had a 30-year career in law enforcement, 20 years of which were spent in either management, supervisory, or administrative positions. I have probably 20 years experience in application and development of budgets. My last position was a commander I had 260 employees, $23 million budget. I dealt with personnel matters of every kind you can imagine in that career period of time. I have a degree in criminal justice, and I also have a degree in education, vocational education, training and development, which I think lends itself to taking a position like this. I can go in, I can identify the needs of the staff, and develop a curriculum if necessary to make sure they get the proper training to do the job as efficiently as possible. I decided to apply when asked to go forward because I did run for the position in 2018, came in second out of 3 candidates. Now, as then, I believe that the position of the assessor is essentially an administrative position. There's a lot of codified law that's required, all readily available to understand. You don't necessarily need to have someone who's gone out and personally done assessments in order to run the organization. I supported, I think I said this earlier, I was happy to apply. I was saddened, though, that there was a vacancy coming. I supported Grant during the campaign. When we first met to discuss, I was asked to come in and talk with him because I had done a lot of research on the department and its requirements when I ran. And I was really surprised that he and I had similar ideas as to what the issues were with the department and also how they might be corrected. I'm saddened that he only had 5 months or so in there. I'm sure that he has already started those. In fact, I recently, in a week, had the opportunity to talk to members of the department who are related to that. Their morale has already gone up a little bit because of the positive changes that he's made. I don't know how much he's been able to accomplish in that short period of time, but I'm sure what he had in mind is very similar to what I had, and I will continue that progress. The department, you might know, has gone through turmoil for the last decade or so. They've had almost 100% turnover in personnel, and it's all due because they haven't had solid direction. And I intend to give the position to go in there and make it a unified organization. I'm going to be proud of working there. Certainly.
Yeah, questions?
I do, and for me, it's really important that the people that are employees in that department actually get an opportunity to ask all of you questions because they're the group that you've been working with. And so I want to make sure that they know as you're sitting the farthest back there, that your input is valuable. One of my questions is we've heard a lot from the assessor group how much they have seen a difference in the change of their office under Grant's leadership. And so when you look at that big of an impact in that short amount of time, how do you come in as a selected and not elected assessor and maintain that continuity of that team while you move forward? And have you been following what Grant has been working on?
Can I just get them to either go to the podium or stand up and face back? Because with the air come on, you couldn't really hear you guys in the back. So give everybody an opportunity to.
Yeah.
And then I sent you actually in resume so that if we could print it.
I will do that.
Thank you. I had your resume.
So we'd like to hear.
I think all of the assessor people that came because this.
Well, Grant, if you have a question that we might not think of because we're not assessors, I'm sure I could know of a couple.
Well, do you, and make sure that you guys point out when you have something to say on that team.
Is that good? Testing? So the question, if I remember, is how am I, as an appointed or as opposed to an elected official, going to go in and maintain the changes that have been implemented by Grant in the past 5 months, which I've already spoken to. I've talked to people, and they're pleased in that direction. that he would go on. In my 30-year career, I had a number of commands, and I had to go into difficult situations that had supervisors who were fired and who were in turmoil, and I had to correct that situation. What I always do, and I did this in the Marine Corps too, when I got a new assignment, I always talk to the people, find out where they're at. Any supervisor, manager, or administrator will tell you that you're going to know who the difficult people are before you get into the position. But the people that are more important are the 80% or so that are doing the job every day, but just don't feel like they're part of something that's unified. My position would be to go in and talk to people, find out where they're at, assure them that we're going to go forward, not backward, and that they're all part of the group, and they all have a voice. We all have a voice. So be inclusive. I've always found that my leadership style works best when I'm pulling, not pushing people in a direction. I want to let people know that their input is important and they're part of the progress.
Thank you.
Dan Rose. So I operate on the management style of the thirds. You have a third of the time to assess the problem, a third of the time to fix the problem, a third of the time to tweak the problem. And so I've recognized already that Grant has performed very admirably in the first 5 months, and I don't wish to change anything that he has started. I'll have to observe what is actually going on there and stuff that he might have missed. He's good, but 5 months is that short time. So I would do that. I would listen to what they're saying. I'd have an open door policy. And so when people are coming with solutions or problems and they need to be addressed, my first reaction is to motivate them to address the problem. In my management style in the military, how do we say? I need to train my replacement. And so if I'm not training those under me to do my job in my absence, then I'm failing. So the first step in that is to give them some ownership, to allow them some opportunity to run with an issue and a resolution, and then we'll discuss it and work with it as it moves forward.
Thank you.
Tom Brown. Yeah, great points by both you gentlemen. I would believe my management style is I always believe that it's important to give your team a voice. Most people, in my experience, want to be heard. They want to feel valued. And in my past experiences, when I would transition one base or begin work with a new command, we'd sit down and talk about what our goals are. Where are we? Where do we need to get? And how do we measure our success along the way? It's important to make sure that your team feels heard, they feel valued, and I would empower my team. I'll give a quick example. When I took over Joint Base Lewis McChord, the leadership that was in place at the time was more of an authoritarian type of leadership. The team didn't really feel valued. They certainly didn't think that their ideas were welcomed. The day one, when I went in and began the transition process, we talked about where they were and what did they need from me, what had worked for them in the past and what wasn't working, even more important. So I think it's more of when we have a challenge, when we've got a problem, we need to sit down as a team, figure out where our strengths are with all of the team members, and then play to those strengths. I would never say that I'm the smartest guy in the room every single time. I might be the guy that has the idea, but I might not be the person either. It may be the person sitting to my left or to my right that would have more experience or a stronger strength in an area when we're trying to solve a problem. So it's more of a governance by unification, I would say. And it served me well in the past. I have been able to take teams that were underperforming and really find out where they valued themselves in that team, where did they want to go, and how did I help them get there? because I felt when I put their needs in front of mine and I led by example, we're able to do great things and meet any challenge that came our way. So, thank you.
I got a question for all three. Yours mostly law enforcement background, the other two of you are heavy military background. As a leader, from a military perspective and a lot from law enforcement perspective, when you give direction to subordinates, the military, it's not like it's optional for them. I mean, it is, but the repercussions are pretty heavy if they decide not to do that. And so there's a different requirement for the continuity with the public versus military and with law enforcement, because you're in an arena where following the orders are not really optional. But on the same token, military and law enforcement, you have to build that team so that when it comes time that team operates as a team, no matter what. And so would each one of you be able to make that transition or the leadership role from private to military or law enforcement?
So my background, I was not in the service, but the partnership that we formed with the military was something called a PPV, or private public venture. So our company owned 51% of the operation, and then the government owned 49% of it. So we were always in the same room when we were making decisions. I never governed from a point of absolution. I think it's important that you've got to get everybody's buy-in that is a stakeholder and sitting at the table, because we need to hear everybody's idea. And then we'll take those, we put those together, and then we come up with the best way to move forward. So I would have no problem whatsoever. I never came off as an authoritarian. I think that people, to be effective, they've got to be heard. And I find that many times, most times, when we had issues, it was either lack of communication or no communication. So if you can get your point across and make them understand, get them to buy into the project, whatever that is, or that challenge, and be part of the solution, then you're going to move forward as a team. My biggest compliment was that when you build an operation and you step off to go do something else, that operation continues to run without you. You are training your successors, you are training everyone to run independently to their greatest strengths. And when you do that, they can run independently, no matter if we're down a person, then we have someone else who can step in and take over that role and work in a cohesive manner.
Contrary to popular belief, cops do not like to take orders from anybody. So you as a supervisor, manager, you have to learn to negotiate, to be inclusive, let them know what the overall plan is. Same thing in the military. Before I went out on an ambush or something, I always briefed my squad, every one of them, to let them know what the ultimate objective was and what the time frame we were in at. I also supervised and managed a number of clerical personnel, so they're different than cops. So you have to develop what I call situational management skills. You manage to that person, to the needs of that person, to the needs of that assignment. And most of all, it included letting people know where they were going, what they were going to be doing with their time, and why it's important. And if they have a voice, you listen to it with respect and earnest. So that's what I would do.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I come from a background of both police and military. Military was a few years ago, but almost 2 decades ago. in the end, the leader is responsible for whatever decision is made, whether it's through the subordinates or the leader himself. I was, as a police officer, I worked for a bureaucrat system. It's a state hierarchy, and it's not like the sheriff's office, which is slightly different, in that the sheriff is responsible to the people. State troopers are responsible ultimately to the governor. And so we had a little different way of looking at things. It wasn't exactly the same as the sheriff, but I operated like a sheriff. I wasn't the company guy pushing quotas. I was pushing, how do we say, service instead. And so that there's a little bit of difference there in understanding who you are and what you're doing. In the police side, in the Army side of the house, it was National Guard. So it was that mix between active military and civilians. And so I was dealing regularly with the civilian population in a weekend role, other than the 6 months that we were at war in Desert Storm. And so I understand from that perspective that the civilian component as opposed to the military police component is slightly different. I'm aware that Grant's background is in the Navy, and he is able to make that change, as many other leaders in this community have that experience. So I don't think it's necessarily a hard thing to do. It just takes being able to recognize that you're engaging in those two realms. I call it the civilian versus the authoritative environment. And with that understanding, with the proper, how do we say, management techniques, it's not a problem. I wouldn't have a problem with the conversion.
Thank you.
All right. State law mandates that property values are assessed within 10% in an environment with great growth in real estate values and a public that often confuses assessment versus taxation. Could I ask each of you, whoever chooses first, to give an example of how you would respond to a homeowner who's been in their home for 10, 20, 30 years. Their assessment is through the roof, and they are wondering, how am I going to pay my taxes?
So that would be a crisis type of event where you're dealing with a public member that does not maybe understand the severity of the increase. And so education is important, and education is important prior to the becoming a crisis moment. And so in that case with, how do you say, inflating property values and things running high quick, they need to understand the process of how we got to where we're at this day. And the tax commission allows several different options of how to get to those annual assessments. And so the management practice that the assessor takes will contribute or negate some of that conflict. Coming in, you first need to empathize with them, and I think I can empathize with them because I've experienced a 10% over assessment and I've appealed it through the state tax commission. So I understand how things can be, how do we say, improperly done, but I understand with common sense that there's ways you can alleviate some of that as well. You can't alleviate necessarily all of it. The upward rise is something that the office policy dictates, whether you do a trend increase on an annual basis, which actually makes the taxpayer pay more. If the 5-year annual physical assessment period is where you make that increase, that's when I think you get a lot of the heartache, because you've gone a year or two or three without much of an increase, then all of a sudden you get hit hard. And I've listened to a lot of BOEs in the last couple of years, and so I understand that is part of the problem. But that's what exists in code, and that process actually makes the taxpayer pay less because they're getting the increase once instead of increases over several years in time. And so if they understand some of that, they might come to, find a little bit of comfort. And other than educating them in what other exemptions the office might offer to alleviate that, I would say on the downside, when the market's going down, the downward trend for everybody would be, most welcomed by all, and not, instead of having to wait for that fifth year to come around for you to see the decrease in value. And so I don't believe there's the policy for upward trend benefits the taxpayer, but it's an option for them if they want it that way. And if it's on the downside, then I would say trend analysis assessment is definitely applicable.
Thank you.
I would say that I think we all have experienced the rise in property values in the last few years here, and surprised when you open your assessment statements. I know I was, like probably everybody else. I think a lot of that is going to be, you need to follow the real estate trends, because it's all obviously cycles up and down, and educate the people when they call. You're going to have to empathize with them. I had to do a lot of problem solving, obviously, when I worked with a lot of military families. There were crisis situations that we had to help them deal with. I think that, if they feel that they need to question their assessment, there's an appeals process that's available for them. I think we need to make them aware of any exemptions that they may or may not qualify for, that may be able to offer them some relief. But I think communication and understanding and education as far as how do we get here and how can we help you, because we're here to serve the public. Bottom line, all of us, have a certain responsibility to be a good steward of the citizenship, the community that we live in, and try to make this the very best place to live that we possibly can. We live in a wonderful, wonderful area. I came from a place, we fled from a place south of here about a dozen years ago. And I have seen what happens when you have unchecked taxation, when you have regulation that is out of control, and how it erodes not only just the counties, the cities, but just the culture overall, and the citizenship suffers for that. So I believe that we need to be open and transparent with the citizens, let them know how we arrived at those assessments, and provide any avenues for relief or exemption that we possibly can for them.
Thank you.
To clarify, you're talking about the assessment of the property, not the actual tax bill?
All of the above.
All of
So
the-
if you're the homeowner, because the homeowner, I believe, often confuses some, not all, but oftentimes the assessment gets confused with your tax bill. So
Okay.
part of the whole relationship.
Yeah, if it, like Dan pointed out, if it falls on the 50-year cycle where there's a physical inspection, it may be, if it's in one of the other 4 years, it may be a product of CAMA, the computer assisted mass appraisal. Is that correct? Yeah. And as a result, they take a block of residents and then they put them in the computer that has formulated based on current values and sales and prices and all that other stuff, and they generate a price. There is an opportunity there to then look at that specific piece of property and have the assessor that went out and looked at it review it, and if the homeowner's agreeable to a physical inspection, we could do that, and that may change some of the numbers in terms of what the appraised value, the assessed value of the property is. As far as the tax bill itself, that's all generated by the mill rates that are imposed by the various taxing authorities. And there are limits based on statute law, how far they can go in a particular given year. But the assessor's office doesn't have anything to do with establishing mill rates or imposing the actual dollar amount that is assessed on any given piece of property. Now, you mentioned that they are just in a bad situation and not able to afford it. They may be a candidate for some of the exemptions, either a referral or a reduction in it. And I would give them that information, and if they qualify, encourage them and help them to file for an exemption based on that. That is something that has to be filed for every year. So that's what I would do.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the assessor's office is it's an interesting position because the public has a certain expectation, desire, and the state has requirements that may not always agree with what the public expects or wants. We're a non-disclosure state, which means people don't have to disclose their values. We're only one of 10, so that's one way that makes our job harder. North Idaho, people are very conscious of their privacy, their private property rights. The law requires that we do no less often than every 5 years, we do a physical appraisal of every property. Not everybody's willing to cooperate with that. How does each of you balance these competing expectations put before you by the state, by the public, the other elected officials that you work with, et cetera? How do you manage that and still, how do you manage that?
Well, as far as complying with the state laws and the rules from the tax commission, you really have no discretion. You either do it or you can be fined or removed from office. So the heavy side of that is how do you deal with the perception and desires or preferences of the community? And one is education. You have to explain to them what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you're doing it. As far as privacy is concerned, I really liked you're sending out the notices to people, letting them know that we'd like to come visit and do an inspection of the property, that we will be there. And that gives them an opportunity that they've never had before, notice. And that sets a whole different stage of other than somebody showing up with some authority on their property and demanding to have access and assess things. If they have notice, they have time to prepare for it mentally, for it inevitably. I was just a couple of weeks ago talking to a friend who received a notice from your office, never received one before, and this person is not the kind of person, let me just say, he's a typical North Idaho personality. He doesn't have much use for government, but he and his wife were elated that they've never had that courtesy before. So I'm assuming that most people are going to treat it the same way. And so I applaud you in applying that, and that's something that will continue if I'm in the assessor's office. But knowledge is the key. You got to be open, you got to be transparent, and you got to be fair with people.
To your question, I would say that education, communication, and keeping an open line of communication going back and forth with the homeowner or the property owner. Obviously, if you can involve them in the process and help them understand how we arrived here, they're going to have a better understanding of that. I would think that most people just at face value have a defensiveness towards any government bureaucracy or any government agency just by nature. If we're able to break that down and hearing that you're actually sending like a notice of an invitation, are we able to talk to you about assessment, or this is what you should expect, so they're not surprised and they understand what the process is going to be, then you can involve them in the process and get them to buy into it a little bit. I think that if rather than coming down with a heavy hand and saying, here's what the taxes are, you got to pay them by this date, and that's all there is to it. If you involve them in the process, help them understand how we arrived at the value, and you can demonstrate that and back that up, then you're going to have a much better working relationship with those folks. Some are obviously going to be harder to work with than others. That's nothing I haven't experienced in the past. But I think the opportunities exist if we're keeping that communication line open and working together as a team to help them understand why, how do we get where we are today? And here's how we're going to help solve it for you. Thank you.
So, Grant, I think the question was, how do you get people to come on board with the restrictions you have from many different sources?
How do you balance two competing sets of ideals when there might not be a clear and easy path forward, when the public doesn't necessarily understand the state's expectations,
right,
and so forth? How do you navigate those tensions?
Right, and that is part of that mitigation process of educating we call them the customer, the taxpayer. Your how do we say, staffs or yours, I'm not sure whose responsibility is, but the notices are absolutely praiseworthy of you. I would say anybody that does have a do not trespass sign or a gate, that's closed would be absolutely the candidate for that notice. The ones that don't might be well accepting of your presence anyway. And so I would put extreme emphasis on those who are already outwardly objecting to perhaps your presence there. The assessor's office has to make those assessments by current market value. And so there's different ways of that market value to be established, being your comps in the neighborhood and like properties. I've had the exposure that you weren't able to get comps from outside of a certain geographic area that might have very similar characteristics to your property. I've actually been prevented from those comps, and so I would not move to that level. In that situation, if it required me to go that extra mile, then I would, go in, have that person have the ability to see those other comps, so that they know it's not just their neighbor's recent build out that pushed them up over the top. Maybe there is something somewhere else that they can make a comparison to that is an actual valid comp. So I know that the State Tax Commission has its rules and it has standards that the office needs to be within, and that standard is a reflection of, how do we say, the inability to be entirely 100% accurate to the assessment of that property, but getting it as close as possible with other comps would be a way to do it.
I would love to hear from our staff the questions that they have.
No questions about salaries, bonuses.
Got to walk all the way up here. No, you start.
Come on down, you're the next contestant.
Chairman Bradshaw, just while I was walking up there, we also have a bunch, there's realtors here. I know that Stephanie Reed from MLS is here. I know there's representatives from title companies. So just letting you guys know that, and it's totally up to you.
Okay. Name for the record.
Al Ribeiro, for the record, residential appraiser. Just a follow-up question. We are mandated by law to be at 100% of market value annually. How we do that, we look at sales, we analyze them, and we make adjustments based on that. And every year we actually do increases, decreases, depending on the market. The physical inspections, those are done every 5 years, just to find if we have any characteristics that are erroneous and correct those. So my question is, I've heard the word fair being mentioned, a fair assessment, that's important. But the second part of that is being equitable. We need to make sure that we're assessing folks the same way. So when you cannot access a property to do that inspection, how are you going to know if you're under assessing that property? Because if it is, you're shifting that burden to other taxpayers. And that is what we have to do. We're constantly battling that with finding ways to get information to make sure that our assessments are accurate. So I would like to know what your plans are to try to make sure that we're all being treated fairly and equitably.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So great question, because I think we all want to be treated as fairly as possible when it comes to assessed value and property taxes. Idaho being unique as a non-disclosure state makes it even more interesting because people don't have to report sales data. So the MLS is a great source to be able to use to find past sales or expired listings. As one tool, computer valuation modeling is also another one that could be useful. And I think too, when you have someone that feels that they have been overassessed, it's important to, again, talk to them and show them your data. Say, here's what we've got. And if you have other reasons that you feel that are important why we are disagreeing on value, let's take a look at those and see what we can do to try to come up with something that works for everybody. Obviously, this state has obligations financially. We're trying to be fair to everyone. And we're trying to make sure that we don't shift the tax burden from one person to another, because there is the obligation to fulfill all the services that the county must provide, from schools to libraries, or roads and bridges and everything else. So again, I think it's open communication and having the mindset that we may need to do some further research on this. We may need to get more data and working with the property owner to make sure that we have everything possible. Look at all the data, do a thorough analysis before we arrive at a value. If we do that each and every time, I think we can be as fair as we possibly can.
So I think the question actually had part of the answer in it, and it was at the very end, and it was accuracy. And so being as accurate as you can within the confines of the law or the code is the way you can help mitigate that, how do we say, fairness of the assessment. Now, I know it's been mentioned for quite a while now that the commercial properties are unfairly underweighted in the assessment. And Grant has researched it, and there's a program that he's looking at, CoStar, that would utilize, some dynamics that you can get assessment numbers without having with the condition of non-disclosure in the state. And so I believe that is something that the county absolutely has to buy into in this next budget process. And I think that would be one way of alleviating or making the situation of equitable assessment apply to the two different groups of assessment between commercial and residential.
Al, was your question related to the physical inspection that every fifth year, or in between when they're using mass evaluation?
It was more relating to the inability of physically inspecting a property and not knowing what's actually there.
Right.
So how are you going to collect that data, or how are you going to overcome that?
As you pointed out, state law requires 100% assessment. But in practicality, you really can't do that unless you actually have a physical walk through the entire place and take every aspect of the property in consideration. So we're always evaluating as best we can on the knowledge we have. before, when you just walk around the outside and make an evaluation or take measurements of the diameters, and you base it, you come up with a value based on sales or cost or income, whatever is appropriate at the time. But I think you can do that if you have a group of people that have knowledge. 10 of you may have 40 years experience, combined experience in assessing these things. So if you have a piece of property that you really can't get onto, you still can get information about it. And then you would have a group of people in the office look at that and say, well, it's my experience. If this is present, then this is the general value, and then work at it from that. Now, if you end up appraising the property at a higher value than the homeowner believes that it should be, they are more than welcome to come in and appeal that process. And we will work with them in any way we can to come to some resolution or agreement as to what the value of the property is.
So Grant has, during the election period, we heard Mrs. Gao say over and over the value of being, an official certified person. And so Grant has actually done a lot of education and training, and he's made himself physically available to the community through town halls, and he's, developed a relationship with his team. I've heard people make the comment that the function is really administrative, which sometimes that means you have an over-reliance on the specialty of the people that are under you, which can appear to shift responsibility of the duty of the assessor to the person who has a background in the commercial appraisal or the residential appraiser. And so I will speak-ish on their behalf of how are you going to make sure that how are you the best candidate, and how do you make sure that your dynamics that you bring, because if I'm correct, nobody has actually a background in appraising, right? And so how do you make sure that you hold on to your responsibilities as the assessor without shifting that responsibility to the employees while you maintain, you're ready to jump already. While maintaining what they have currently and while maintaining what the community has currently. Because I will tell you, District 2 and Spirit Valley were very excited with the changes that this team has made. And this is a scary process for a lot of people, but probably nothing more scary than feeling like nobody has a background in appraisal, and these people are commercial appraisers, residential appraisers, and they have been on a team working, and they're going to have to accept a person without that background. So how do you manage that minefield?
Well, I've already downloaded the training manual from the state, and I'm going through that, as well as a list of courses that are going to be presented through 2023. And it's my intention to take advantage of those things. In the past, when I'd go to an area, let's say from patrol to corrections or something like that, there was a learning curve. There is for anybody. Even if you were, let's say, a correctional officer, left and then came back years later as a lieutenant, there's still a bit of a learning curve because you didn't do that specific job in that industry. So what I would do is what I always did is I would go to the staff, find the people with the experience and expertise in the different areas, and then sit with them and allow myself to be a student, to be trained. I even did this when I was in Vietnam. I went from the grass lowlands and transferred it into the mountains, and it's a completely different war. I found a young Lance Corporal from East LA who had been there for months and months, and he knew how to fight the war up there. And I told him and the squad, I'm responsible for everything. Every decision is mine and the consequences are mine. But for the next 2 weeks, this guy's going to be leading us and I'm going to be learning. And I instantly got the respect and cooperation. They were coming to me to offer suggestions. So that's how it.
Thank you.
Great West Asia, and I think I can speak to this a little bit. Years ago, when I was promoted to regional vice president of military housing, it was a fairly new role in the industry, and I had to learn how to interface not only with staff members that had been there for a period of time that probably had more situational knowledge than I did on certain subjects, as well as base command, and then our private partners, and how do we make all this work together So I had to work with the folks that were essentially subject matter experts. I sat them all down, got a big conference room for about a week and said, okay, you guys need to bring me up to speed. Let's find out who is strong in what area. What can I learn from you? How do I support you in your role? Are there changes that you feel that we could make to make you more effective? How do we problem solve as a team? Because obviously I didn't have that background, and coming into it, my role was more to gel the teams, to ultimately I would be the one that was responsible for the decision, but I gave everybody the opportunity to buy in and said, look, I understand that this is what your specialty is. Here's where your strengths lie. Let's work together and everybody get on the same page. So when we present this either to our government partner or to the citizenry, we stand as a team. They understand that the information that we drew upon to come up with these decisions was factual. It was accurate, and we were able to make sure that we could back up whatever facts and data that we had with actual situational analysis. So I think obviously there's going to be a learning curve. You know, there's a lot of people that have been an assessor once and applied for an assessor position. I'm sure that's someplace. However, there always will be challenges when you're stepping into a new role. I think you have to, again, rely on the strengths of your team to be able to help you get up to speed as quickly as possible. Whatever certificates and training you need to do, you need to make sure you get involved with that and get that taken care of as quickly as possible. But giving the team a voice and having them feel like they're included in the decision-making process, I think holds a lot of value. I had many situations where previous to my arrival, there were people that were doing a certain amount of work, fulfilling whatever task that was, and then they would send it upstream, and then they would send it on. And there was the operational report that needed to be completed. The person who completed it sent it to me and said, go ahead and send it on when you're ready. I said, well, you did the report. Why don't we take a look at it together and then you send it on? Because you're the one who's getting credit for this. You did the work. That's not my work. I'll oversee it for you. But what that did was gave that person a sense of value. Like, they never did this for me before. They always were taking credit for somebody else's work. So I think that whatever you can do to build that sense of value in the team, to build the strength and rely on the team that you work with to make sure that you put your best foot forward. Everyone knows they're moving in the same direction, and you work as a unit, essentially, to accomplish your goals is going to be a good thing.
Thank you.
So the assessor coming in this next week or so is going to get faced with their entire year's work in the next couple of months for the most part. And I think it would be highly unrealistic for anyone in this room to think any one of these three candidates knows what they're doing in, how do we say, complete form to be able to handle that task. Therefore, as part of the management style that I think a lot of us have in our military police background, it is giving employees, how do we say, the trust to accomplish the task. We can evaluate that as it goes forward. I'm sure Grant has put the office in a very, how do we say, acceptable position to accept any one of the three of us. And it is incumbent upon each of us to immerse ourselves into getting up to speed. The State Tax Commission will help in that matter. There's an assessor's manual that Mr. Engelhardt has downloaded, but I have access to in years past. I believe it's somewhere over 100 pages long. And knowing the code and getting, bringing yourself up to speed will win respect with the employees as much as giving them the trust to get us through this next few months.
Okay. I think Assessor has some questions.
Okay, I wanted to talk about a couple of the other less sexy roles for the assessor. As you guys know, the assessor runs the DMV in Idaho, and as well as the assessor is responsible for tracking ownership, land and property ownership, deed transfers, platting, all the mapping, maintaining all those records. So I guess this is kind of a two-part question. Talk about your experience in the land records management platting side of things. How are you going to lead that group? I guess it's two kind of distinct questions. And also with the DMV, how do you plan to keep the DMV self-funded as it presently is when the state is presently trying to defund it by taking those dollars to Boise?
Okay, so the first question, I'll hit the last part of your question first. Tomorrow, there is a special meeting for a rise in service rates, registration and title rates. Jolene runs, if I'm not mistaken, the DMV part of the organization. And I think we're missing an opportunity here for the transparency to be offered to the public. One, that rate's going up 133%, and that is not the key factor. It looks bad when you look at the rate, but when you look at the states adjacent to us, there's only one state, Utah, being the lowest and lower than what our anticipated rate is going to be after the meeting tomorrow. So I understand the DMV part of it. We're in good shape there. I believe that your office has put that rate at, how do we say, a labor attachment. If you can do three pieces of paper, you know, that labor rate's got to be covered as well as the overhead rate. What was the beginning part of the question? Oh, a GIS and recording.
Records, basically.
Yeah. And so you've got multiple different small group departments within the department. And I'm assuming each one of them has, I would say, a special person attached to it, like Jolene is DMV. I don't know who is doing the GIS and the mapping and the recording. But those people, again, have knowledge that I would rely on. And I will bring myself up to speed and learn as much as they know, hopefully in a short period of time. But is the first part of the question that I'm missing? I thought it was three
You're
parts.
just talking about your experience in that aspect of the job as well.
Yeah, and so you've got, and generally you've got multiple small group components of the office. And I come from a background of small group type stuff. State police, I was on a underwater recovery team, small group team. And so managing, or even with the central committee, I call that a small group. I would call the Pender Lake taxing district a small group. Managing people in the small groups, giving responsibility to the people most qualified, and how to say, relying on their trust is where I would go with that. The short answer is immersing yourself in the information to be educated so that you have the respect of those who are working for you.
Thank you.
As to the first part, I don't have any experience in that directly, but as Dan said, you probably have somebody in your office that has dealt with it for quite some time. I would spend time with them learning what the current process is, make sure that it's operating as efficiently as it can. And then once I know that and I'm at a comfort zone there, then I would start searching the state and see how other people are doing it, and if there's a system out there that's more efficient than the one that we have. Or is there something that the state is developing currently to replace the existing system? And then I would work towards adopting that whenever it became available. As far as DMV concerned, did I hear you say that the DMV's contemplating pulling money away from the DMV?
The last last year and going into next fiscal year, they're migrating to a plan. They're pushing the online and mail-in renewals to the whole entire state, which when folks get that in the mail, they're incentivized to go online and mail it in. Well, the registration fees in doing so no longer come to the county to self-fund the brick and mortar activities we have in Reese Lake or Reese River and Monterey. So how do we keep, the question is really, how do we keep the doors open without tapping into property tax money, which I'm sure these three don't really want to, it's not very politically palatable.
So popular.
Yeah. To do so, how do we keep the residents served? And when that's the reality that Boise is still expecting us to perform this task as assessors while not providing the funding to do so.
Okay.
But apart from the other two, for adding more color to that if I did. So.
Okay. Well, online services, I mean, that's where it's going. It's not turning back from that. You got brick and mortar places from all industries closing down because they're doing more work more efficiently and less cost over the internet. Government's going to be doing the same thing. I don't think we're going to change the state's mind if we're bringing in X dollars in 2022 and that drops by 30% in 2023, then there are some things that you have to look at. Maybe scheduling office hours. Maybe not open 10 hours a day or 8 hours a day now. You might have to cut back on that time there. Bottom line is if the state is not affording you the opportunity to maintain status quo as far as the brick and mortar operation goes, you're going to have to make some critical and often uncomfortable decisions about the size and availability of your service.
Thank you.
So get to the first part of your question about meets and bounds and plats and maps. My experience would be just real estate transactions overall, in working with those types of things. So as far as the DMV goes, we see this happen time and again, where the state mandates something that citizens must do, but they can't fund. And then they leave the solution up to the county or school board, whatever, whoever that is, to come up with those solutions. I think that obviously there's a team here that deals with the DMV and those types of administrative functions. I think I would rely on the team, the subject matter experts, to say, okay, here's where we are. Here's the reality of the situation. Last year we had $1 million. This year we've got $500,000. How do we manage to this money so we're not putting an extra burden on the taxpayer? And how do we serve the citizen that still wants to go to the DMV? I understand the online process. I just did it. It was actually pretty effective, and I was surprised. But there is that percentage of our population that likes that face-to-face interaction, and we're losing a lot of that these days when everything is online and we're on our phone free. We don't get anybody to talk to. It can be frustrating. So whether it be working with the DMV office and saying, okay, where do you see we could create some efficiencies here where we could still keep it open? Maybe it's 3 days a week, or maybe it's 3 10-hour days instead of 5 10-hour days. What are our options before we have to make any hard decisions and then try to get everybody on the same page, which obviously is going to be difficult, to try to kind of find a solution that works not only for the taxpayer, but the citizen who needs those services, and then the people that are employed at the DMV. I think we need to get everybody who has a vested interest to have a seat at the table and work as a team to come up with a solution. Thank you.
Relative to the DMV, I didn't want to sound too draconian. If the changes we decide that we have to make because there's a loss of revenue includes reducing personnel, I would make every effort to move those people into current vacancies within the county. I think they should have priority in those positions as current employees, if I can't move them into some other aspect of the assessor's department itself. So wouldn't be just chopping heads and moving people out without any safety net.
Thanks, Grant, for, how do we say, allowing me the opportunity here. I didn't get that part of it. But where you have the state and county conflicting here, I think you need to, how do we say, reach out to our state representatives and senators. There obviously seems to be a conflict of, how do we say, assuming revenue, revenue that the county has been generated, and now you're in a cooperative type of environment with the state. So I would suggest that somehow there might be a look at the legislation that regulates the way that monies are divided and received. So I think there's another option there, and I do have experience in the political realm with the Central Committee and the legislators there to potentially use their voice as part of that solution.
And just so for those that don't follow all these super exciting details in their private lives, part of what's being contemplated tomorrow with the increase in titling fees is an effort that the legislature passed to mitigate some of the loss in revenue to the local offices. So while they see ITD lowering for taking some of that money to Boise away from local offices, the legislature has, part of the mitigation strategy was to allow local offices to charge for the brick and mortar aspect of it through an increase to titling fees. So that part is it's all tied up in that. So.
Yeah, that was actually refreshing because legislature traditionally is really good at passing legislation and mandates for the county, but you guys figure out how to pay for it. So, yeah, it'd be nice if they actually had to be an elected county officer for a while before going to legislation. That would be a blessing. So did some of the realtors or have any questions or? Name for the record, once you get up there.
I'm the executive director for the Selkirk Association of Realtors and MLS. And I would like to ask the candidates, we've worked very hard over the past several years, actually more than 10, to have a good relationship with the assessor's office. We do provide data to the assessor's office, sold data, if the seller and buyer agree to it. Now, we've had some issues in the past where people think that this data should be just given out willy-nilly. It is not. It is not to be given out. And that states that in the agreement. And we also have taken this debate at one point in time all the way to the state attorney general's office. And I would like to know, because the data is proprietary to our organization and our members, how you would approach to continue working with the MLS and in protecting that proprietary data. Thank you.
I think the assessor's office has contracted with you for quite a number of years, and it seems to have worked successfully, and I would continue to do that. I hate to see the opportunity disappear for that informational input.
And I want to make sure we're close to the mic and project because it's not an amplifying mic, it's just for YouTube.
Okay. Yeah, I think especially in Idaho, given the non-disclosure status, the MLS is a very valuable source for data. And obviously, you need to balance that with people's privacy and what they want to disclose and what they don't. I've been a real estate agent. I've been a member of the MLS, and I think, especially in Idaho, we don't have access to. They don't have to record the sales price. So if you have a good working relationship with the MLS, that's only going to benefit the taxpayer. It's only going to benefit everybody involved because the whole goal is to try to get the most accurate assessment possible. And if you don't have access to public records where that information is there, you are going to have to find other sources. Using a computer modeling system is going to be less accurate in my estimation, because you're going to have a lot of variances that you would not have if you can have a working relationship with the MLS and get those past transactional sales data. So again, I think that's cornerstone to the office and trying to keep it as accurate as possible.
Okay, so it's my understanding that the agreement, the MOU that the Selkirk Realty Association has is with the Commissioner's Office. And I assume that the Commissioner's Office will be looking to the assessor to see how that they're going to, how do we say, accommodate your desires. I might differ from the previous two candidates on this issue. Looked at that MOU quite extensively in the past, and it is valuable. But there is also an issue here of equitableness and fairness to the taxpayer when it comes to the assessment. And so I think what you're saying, Stephanie, is that those comps are proprietary and that you don't want that information to be given out. I say I work for the people and I support all of the groups, but we have to find some common ground to where the taxpayers can be satisfied that they're getting meaningful comps and not abusing them. So I don't know exactly where it is right now. I can say I've experienced from the taxpayer end the detriment of that arrangement, and I would look to make it as fair as possible for the association and the county in the future.
Can I ask a follow-up on that statement? Or
I would just like to point out that data is proprietary. It is owned by the MLS. It is a privilege for the assessor's office to obtain that information. The agreement states that the agreement is not a memorandum of understanding. It is an actual agreement that has been vetted by the county's attorneys, our attorneys, and state attorneys on many occasions. So Al has been through this with me. He was wonderful in helping make all of this happen and come to a favorable agreement. And it is our position, and I can speak for my members as well, to maintain a favorable relationship. And for the next person, and Grant, I apologize, we've never got to talk, and I'm sorry to leave. That we maintain that positive relationship and to help the taxpayers and be able to give the assessor's office an ability and a tool to help make fair assessments. But the MLS data should not be the only tool we use.
so can I summarize what you said, and you correct me if I'm wrong, only because you weren't by the microphone when you spoke. Essentially, it's proprietary information, and we've written an agreement between the county and MLS that we will not disperse the information, correct? So essentially, that's what she restated. So then my question to you, Dan, is given that that is what the agreement is, are you in favor then of the county not engaging in that agreement? Because that's what we've signed on to do, is to not disperse it. And what I believe you're referencing is that people have given it out through records requests in spite of the fact that the agreement is the MLS data is protected because it's proprietary to your information, and that we should have a different way of giving the information to show transparency of the comps, not without having to disregard the agreement we've made with your group.
No, that's not quite what I was saying. What I'm saying is the data is given to the county as a privilege to help, as a tool to make fair assessments. Not all property owners are willing to share the sold prices. That goes with us as well. So some people don't care, some people do. You guys can send out 8, 10 pieces of paper asking for that data, and you're not going to get a response. That's kind of the same response we get with the MLS. What I'm saying is the state attorney general has determined that our information is proprietary and it is not for public distribution. It is data owned by the MLS. So that's where I was going with that last statement.
So Dan, would you be in favor of disengaging from that agreement,
Yeah, so very
Given
much
what-
appreciated.
what she stated?
So the agreement, as I understand it, is a two-way agreement, and the county offers access for Selkirk Real Estate to our computer system for information that they use as well. And so this is a two-way street, and there's three players involved. There's the county, there's a real estate association, there's the people. And so we need to, how do we say, make that as fair as possible. And if Stephanie's saying that we can't give any comps out, then I'm completely misunderstanding the agreement, or the office is just, for years, has not been, how do we say, operating and compliant. And if that's the case, then we're in a different understanding of where I'm at. I at least know that there's some comps given out now, and I would imagine those comps are, how do we say, sensitive to your proprietary information, as well as the information that the assessor's office gets from other access. And so anything that it has your proprietary information, if it's going to be a benefit to the association through the relationship with the county, I think there has to be some give and take in some sense to what we're giving and what we're receiving. And I think, and I might, how to say, not understand fully what your proprietary is and what the county's given out. But if it is, in the situation that we have right now, that I believe is that comps are given out, and some of it might pertain to a certain amount of your proprietary information, we already have that going on. Now the conversation is, how far do we go with what we give out?
I need to clarify some stuff here. First of all, we absolutely appreciate the relationship with Selkirk MLS, and we do need that data. Idaho is a non-disclosure state, and without the information, if we had to solely rely on the letter we send out after we see a close and getting those responses, that's all we had, we would have so little data to be able to do fair assessments. We would be really working in complete dark. With regard to disclosing, we do respect the privacy of the information given by Selkirk MLS. We use it to defend our values as well, not only to determine them. We will use them in a board of inquiry, or the board of equalization rather, or board of tax appeals to defend our values. So in that respect, those are brought into a public hearing, but only when we defend our values, not for public distribution. So that needs to be kind of clarified as to how that data is being used. So, are there any
Thank
other
you.
questions on that?
Thank you. And just for the record, the information that Dan is saying that we get the tax information from the county, we get a download from the county, or supposed to be getting a download to from the county on a quarterly basis for the tax information into the MLS system. It doesn't happen very often, and a lot of our members have said the information's outdated, so they come straight to the county anyway. And I think Lonnie and Jen can attest to that fact.
Without getting into the weeds too much, we're migrating away from the old
Lonnie,
AS.
oh, sorry. Lonnie wants it. She's walking the mic. Lonnie wants the mic now.
Okay. Yeah, right now, us in the treasurer's office are migrating away from the old system towards a new system and working to have that engagement can be able to be available to not only the real estate community, but also the title companies. But we're traversing some technological challenges right now, internal with the county. So we're hoping, speaking on behalf of Clarissa a little bit here, but that we can get that back up, eventually up online. So I'm hoping that whoever fills these, sits in this chair next week will also continue in that same vein to serve the public in that capacity while also respecting the privacy matter.
That kind of, I need to speak.
It's for the recording, so if you speak into it, it's for the people out on the internet land. Yeah.
My main question was kind of answered, but it seemed like Dan was saying it's a two-way street. You give us the MLS data, or you don't get the access to the public data. Those are two very different types of data, for one. For two, like, you thought it was an MOU a minute ago, and then it's an agreement. So we can't even go down into those weeds. Secondly, I'm just curious, how did these three individuals come to be put forward and chosen to this portion of this when I'm seeing three very similar people, all with military backgrounds, trying to relate dealing with an assessor's office to battle. Like, and maybe that's a question that you can't answer. How did these three candidates get to this level?
We can answer that, but I want to make sure we give the time to the people who were selected. So when an elected official steps down, the party that they ran on has the obligation to identify three potential candidates. And so they notice it into the newspaper, and then people apply, they interview, and then they select three that then come to the Board of County Commissioners.
So the Republican Central Committee chose these three as the finalists to come forward for this position for the assessor's office.
That is the process.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yep. Dan Rose.
Sorry, his name's escaping me. I know he's a school board member, but what's your name again? Williams, Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams, it did escape me. And I don't mean to be confrontational, and I like to think the same as going on the other side. The assessor was elected by the as a Republican, and therefore the state code says that as a Republican, the Republican Central Committee nominates three people from the candidates that are available to them to be presented to the commissioners, and then the commissioners make that decision. There were a number of members from the assessor's office that applied for the job, and four of us that were outside of the office. And Mr. Is it Clark? I'm not sure. Carter. Mr. Carter was the fourth person, and he's with he has an extensive real estate background. And the Central Committee chose from the candidates of 8 or 9 people, these three, and that's how it happened. And so the real estate people were represented both by the people in the office and an outsider for the real estate industry. So that's just how it happened.
So do we have questions, any more questions for the candidates for the position?
Wendy Osman-Koski, residential appraiser. Grant has had 5 months, almost 6 months, to develop a rapport and a trust with us in the departments. You gentlemen are coming in at a very difficult time where we're going to be highly engaged with the public, and there won't be a whole lot of time for us to build a rapport and trust with whomever comes in. So I would like to know how you gentlemen would come in at this time when we are not going to have a whole lot of time to have meetings or one-on-ones or anything like that, and build that trust, build that rapport, and keep the cohesiveness that Grant has started with the departments.
I think turmoil builds unity and cooperation faster than anything else. When you have a group of people that have to work cooperatively to achieve tasks that you're talking about that are going to take place over the next month and a half or so, that's really a good opportunity for people to come to know one another. You don't necessarily have to sit down and have a 40-hour conversation to understand somebody. Just see how they work cooperatively in a stressful situation. It tells you a great deal about them. And I would be coming in not knowing all of the ins and outs of it, but I can observe, I can ask questions, I will be there as it's going on. And then after it's all over, we will critique everything. Not because I want to make sure that you understand all of the processes, but that I understand them. And that's what I would do.
That's a great question, and I think that obviously this is a very busy time of year. The assessments are getting ready to go out, and everybody is working at their full potential. I think that a listing would be very important. Obviously, there would not be a time for week-long meetings and long days as far as trying to bring me up to speed. It would be my responsibility to immerse myself in the process. Try to find out where your strengths are and where I could support you so we could get through this transitionary period. And then that would give us the opportunity to start to build some rapport and some trust and start to work as a team. It sounds like Grant has done a fantastic job and things are going really, really well. So I would be very open to any ideas that the staff had and said, let's get through this crunch time. And then when we have a minute to breathe, let's sit down and talk about processes, how those work, and what I could do to lend support to the team to make it even more successful.
Yeah, as I stated earlier, this next couple months is going to be most of the work that the assessors do compiled into this next brief amount of time. I stated also that I work in the rule of threes. And so in this case, we have 3 years left on the term. The rule of threes, the first rule is to evaluate, then it's to act, and then it's to tweak. So I might not have any option but just evaluate over the next couple months, but certainly this first year is that period of time where I am engaged with the staff of the department in all its different functions. One, to allow them to carry this load as Grant has surely allowed you to be prepared for. And then we'll, as you say, critique the performances and policies that we need to look at into the future. That's how I'll do it. The responsibility is gonna be left to those who have it right now. And until I see there's a need to change it, which I don't see in the next couple months, because I'm not, knowledgeable enough to make that, you will be performing as you have been up to this point.
I think one question that might be existing on this team, so I'll ask it. 3 of the members of this assessor's team applied to be the actual assessor. So how do you see yourselves joining the team of people that have the background of assessing and working with the county in such a way that you don't slow down the progress, because this is probably the worst season to be moving, such that they don't feel like essentially they're doing the job of the assessor and their functions? Because if I play devil's advocate over the selection, I'd be sitting over there saying, why do I have to tell you how to do your job when I wanted to do your job? That is the storming and forming of new teams with a significant deficiency on whoever takes a seat over people with the experience of this team. But not just that, 3 of these people applied to be the assessor. So can you give some more concrete information other than just a continued reliance on them to continue as? Because I will say, in a short period of time, Grant has made a significant impact in the county with respect to the assessor's office. And there has been a lot of discussion over the fear of a new assessor changing the direction, which includes how that team functions. So could we give a little bit on that? And specifically addressing that 3 of them wanted to be the assessor.
They have the expertise. I have to rely on the expertise in their different fields to make administrative decisions, administrative requests, assure that we're complying with the law. My goal is to be just as informative, just as knowledgeable as they are. One of the ways to do that is to rely on them for information, for their experience as an example, to do that. I wouldn't break up any team. I will not make any changes to current assignments or anything until, and if necessary, well down the road, if I feel that there need to be any. Part of my job as an administrator is also a facilitator. If they're doing their job correctly, it's getting done, the office's needs are being, and requirements are being met, that they're going to continue on their job. I'm not here to shuffle things around and make things worse. As far as Grant's administration over the last 5 months, I already told you, I was excited of him going in there. I admired what he had to do. He was very knowledgeable on it. He had solid ideas, not just because they're the same as mine, but I like what he's done so far, and I will continue to do that. Morale's not going to suffer. I'm not coming in there with a heavy stick to try and push people around. I want to come in there, help you do your jobs better, if that's possible. You may already be doing everything absolutely exactly how it needs to be done, and that's why it'll continue. The only thing I would request of you is if you're the only person that knows how to do that function, one of the things that I would do in the time that I'm in there is I would require key people to find someone and educate them and train them as a replacement, because God knows, you never know what's in tomorrow. You may win the lottery, or you may have some misfortune or something, you'll have to leave. We need to have somebody, or should have somebody there that can take your position, and that includes the assessor. The assessor should be developing the skills needed to be the administrator of the department among the people that they supervise. So.
Thank you.
I think that it's a really valid question, Asia, to be asking. Obviously, the three of us don't have some of the skill sets that the appraisers have, and there's going to be a level of fear when there's a transition in any office. I've gone through this before. I would see my role to be as open as possible. My primary role would be to support the team and talk with them and ask them, how are things running? How can I help you? And let me support you. Again, let's get through the busy season, because we couldn't have picked a worse time to try to go through this transition. But not Dan's fault. But I think, there's obviously going to be, again, a little bit of fear going through, but I think, by being supportive, being open to ideas and having an exchange of information that goes back and forth. Obviously, none of us would have all of the answers. We're going to be in a learning curve as we try to get up to speed and try to support the team to the best of our abilities. So again, it sounds like there's been a lot of positive change in the assessor's role in the office during Grant's tenure. And this is not something that I would want to change. I'd want to talk with the team and say, what's working for you now? Do you see that there is opportunity that we could work together as a team to try to make it even smoother, more efficient? So I think that would be the way I would handle it.
Thank you.
So the point has been hammered home pretty good, that any one of the three of us are looking to unite the office and keep it united as Grant has made it. In that capacity, we are the managers of this department, and we're all versed in, how do we say, the code, law, and regulations. I don't think any one of us is at fault in that area. And there is also the converse statement that the three persons in the office, we're all vying for the same job. So what, how do we say, sensitivities might there be if one of the persons in the office was selected and the others weren't? Potentially an outside selection alleviates some of that, and the disadvantage comes with a little bit of a lack of knowledge. So it's a give and take type of thing, but I think these three candidates will ensure that the activities in the office run smoothly and as united as we possibly can.
Thank you.
Hi, Lisa.
My name is Lisa Lawrence, and I'm the lead customer service. I'm on the front desk. So my question to the three of you is, as somebody who's, as you will learn in our office, known as the front line, because there's three of us who answer all the incoming calls of the people who are calling because they're unhappy with their assessment notices. We do our best to always inform them of their rights, all the exemptions available to them. And if somebody says, but I never received that, or I didn't get that, how would you answer that question when we as staff in the office know sales verifications were mailed out, every document, notices of inspection have been mailed out every year for the past 21 years that I've been in the office. So I know those have happened. And when the public calls and says, well, you've never done this or you haven't done that, what is your correct response to that person who, you know, that yes, an assessment notice was mailed, or a letter of inspection was mailed, a sales verification, a property tax reduction, whatever the mailing was mailed out to them, and we do get hundreds back because we don't have correct addresses, because people move and don't tell us their correct address, don't update. So then we are spending lots of hours tracking down phone numbers or whatever we can find to get the information out. So what would be your correct response to the public when you know without a doubt documents were mailed and they're stating no, they were not mailed? That's my question.
Thank you.
So I believe code states that those notices have to be mailed to the last known legal address. And so some of that responsibility, if not all, of the non-notice is on the taxpayer in that case. I believe it is my job as assessor to support the staff underneath me. That goes at the BO and E. If they're presenting a case, I will, support all accurate assessment draw-ups, and with the administration staff at the front desk, it's no different. I take the buck stops here, I take the bullet, and as long as the work is being done, which we know it is in this case, I will suffer all that heartache that the customer or taxpayer has.
Thanks for the question, Lisa. I'm sure your job can be very challenging at times. You have to have a very broad skill set to be able to perform the functions that you do. Yeah, I would say I would agree with Dan on this one. You know, the staff has to know that we have your back. We're going to support you. Obviously, we have documentation. If it's been mailed out and the resident said they didn't receive it, then we would need to verify that. And I would say go ahead and forward that phone call on to myself. Let me go ahead and take it from there and see what we can do to work out some type of, not compromise, but how do we come to an agreement with the taxpayer that said, yes, it looks as all our records indicate it was mailed to this address. Is this your address? Okay. Why don't you come on in? If you want to talk about it, come on in. We'll talk about it and we'll find a solution. So, but I think, yeah, again, supporting the staff is imperative to building trust, building a team environment, and everyone working together.
I can just reiterate what the other two candidates said. My job is to protect the employees. If you have somebody that's being aggressive, won't answer, that call comes to me. I'll take that call. I don't know how often you have the dog ate my homework kind of scenario where they say they didn't get it, but if we can show that we sent out 20,000 notices and 200 came back and theirs is not among those, then I think we're pretty safe at saying that as long as they had the correct address and there was no mistake there, that the notice was mailed, and that would be my position. I support my staff.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Linscott?
How are you guys today?
Oh, he's got a whole book.
Just some of Mark Linscott for the record. I just had some questions, and as I understand, the Bonner County Central Committee put forth 3 nominations per code. But what happens if what's the procedure if you feel that we need to find a more qualified candidate? In other words, someone with experience in the appraisal field. I mean, all due respect for the candidates, I thank the Lord, you guys, and for your service, and we're more than prepared if Canada invades, if you guys are assessor. But without the experience and the ability to interpret our sold data, I think you had mentioned that it's imperative to make sure, or maybe to train the people within staff in case you leave, to have someone ready to take that position. I think Al was. So I guess my question would be, what is the procedure? Or do you have to choose from the 3 gentlemen?
State law, the party selects 3 people. Comes to the Board of Commissioners. We select one. If we do not select one within 15 days, then they appoint the one.
And that was my interpretation. I didn't know if that was exactly how it was done. One question, maybe Grant can answer this. About a year ago, you guys looking at a program, I think it was called Eagle View. Do you guys using that right now?
The county does as an entire county, so lots of departments use that software. This was one of the challenging things, going back to my question about how do we balance between privacy and assessments. Eagle View is an expensive piece of software. But on the other hand, it gives visibility to what's going on in someone's property for the purpose of accurate assessments, which allows us to do our job more accurately, thereby satisfying statute. But on the other hand, can be perceived as violating privacy. So that's the yin and yang of it all. How do we balance that?
So are you currently using that then right now?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
I'll look through here. I think Stephanie touched on some of the stuff as was asked. I know was in regards to one of the reasons why, and not necessarily questions, but comments for you to consider. One of the reasons why we are a non-disclosure state, we're only one of, I think was mentioned 10, I think we're down to 8. Every state that has disclosure requirements has an excise tax. One only needs to go over in the state of Washington, it's up to 3% of the sales price for an excise tax. We fight hard to keep our state from having to pay excise tax and sell this property. We lobby extremely hard down in Boise's association, Idaho Association of Realtors. Fair and equitable, like Al had said, that therein lies the dilemma. Whichever candidate that you guys choose, the state requires an inspection or a new assessment within no more than 5 years, but can be done less. We got our hands slapped pretty hard by the state back in 2008, trending. They overtrended. I mean, the market started shooting down where they were still trending up. The state almost had to come in and take a look at that. We're coming upon BOE season. And I don't know what role the assessor would play if one of you guys are appointed, but wow, what a decision for you guys to make. Thank you.
Thank you.
And to be clear, the Eagle View was something that's been in operations for, I don't know, you could probably ask how many years, and it's not just the assessor's office that uses it. I know that 911 services use that. I know the planning department uses that for compliance. So just to be clear, it's a decision that the county made that affects all different departments. And I've been, quite frankly, consternated over it because to me, it is a challenge to say, okay, this is visibility that me as a landowner, I might not appreciate. At the same time, as an assessor, we have been tasked with the very difficult challenge of coming up with fair assessments, especially when that's coupled with my view of respecting private property rights and not inserting ourselves onto people's property without asking. So it will be a tough challenge for whoever sits in this position to find that balance, complying with state law, meeting those requirements, and also respecting the wishes of the public, which is respecting private property rights and privacy. So wish you the best in that. So
You have any questions for us? Anybody else?
I have one more question.
I knew that. Get up here. I could see it coming.
I tried to push you by giving you that to look at.
Corey Gable for the Assessor's Office. I'm currently the Chief Deputy. My question is for the three. Each of you has said Grant's done such a great job in his last 6 months. Can you tell us what that is, what he's actually done for this office, and what you would have done differently, if there's anything? And also, what your plan is for us in the future. So.
I don't know exactly what part of Grant's plan he was able to implement in the last 5 to 6 months. I know, like I said, when he was campaigning, we had an opportunity to talk. I liked and agreed with the stuff that he wanted, his observations and the strategies that he wanted to use to do that. I mentioned, I think, that I had the opportunity to talk to some people from the office, and they are very excited about the things that have transpired under his administration, and I would continue those. I don't want to say we have the same personality and everything. I'm a different person. But I think I'm as fair and open-minded and kind and gentle as Grant is. So I don't see making any changes to the course right now for the foreseeable future. I mean, if some emergency hits, if all of a sudden the economy crashes, then there's going to be drastic changes that we all have to make. But he's got the ship going in the right direction. And it's not my intention to change course right now.
So last week, when I was invited to meet with the committee, I had the opportunity to speak with one of the other candidates who happened to work in the assessor's office, and he was very enthusiastic about the changes that had occurred. He didn't go into specifics, so I can't either on myself as far as what changes were made, but whatever you have been doing is certainly making a difference, and it certainly did for that gentleman. I think one of my strengths is team building. I don't know everything about being an assessor. Obviously, none of us do. Again, I would come in from a supportive role. Say, how can we help you? I'm not here to kick over the apple cart. I'm here to support you in any way I possibly can to help the operations run more efficiently, if that's possible. You may be running at peak capacity already. Empowering people and taking the time to get to know the team, to be able to work together, I think is incredibly powerful. When you get that synergy going in an office like that, people will do things for each other. They will move mountains to get tasks and challenges overcome and tasks completed. So, I welcome the opportunity. It sounds like things have gone very well since you've been able to transition into office, and I commend you for that. I'm sure this is not an easy role. It's them, and always hand it to your team, because they're the ones doing the heavy lifting, and they're the ones that should be appreciated and recognized for that. So that would be my 2 cents. Thank you.
I too have had conversation with employees in the office, several of them, former and present. So I have an understanding of when it said that Grant has improved conditions at the office. That is the information I am getting, and it didn't come from Grant. So I have to trust that those two witnesses are how do we say, mean well by what he's done, and that's where I would go. I know, in addition to the CoStar for the valuations of residential versus commercial, Grant has researched the MAT, mobile assessor technology. And to me, that understanding would be that the workload will be simplified for the field appraisers. And how do we say, well behind that one if that will, how do we say, be passed by the Board of Commissioners. I believe there's those two projects might be the two biggest ones, and I believe they've both been paid for. And so when we're talking about having the public have trust in us and having the office have trust in us, I think those things carried on that Grant has put forward will go a great distance towards making that happen. Thank you. Thank you, Grant, for everything.
Oh, I guess the only thing I want to comment on, not that this is, just in terms of the direction, I really think for whoever sits in my chair, the best metaphor I can come up with is that the train is the people who are in the office working. They're the train. They're getting the load down the tracks. It's the assessor's job to lay track in the right direction ahead of that train. That's the job of the assessor. That supports them, it gives them the direction, but let's not make any mistake, they're the train. I'm getting it down, so.
Can I have a comment from Jesse? Did you get a response from legal as to whether or not we're making a decision?
We do not have an action item on the agenda today, and the program will most likely be, the chosen one will most likely be Monday morning.
Say that everything needs to be in open session, so deliberations and everything.
So I anticipate a meeting on Monday for deliberation and decision.
I would most likely schedule an open meeting later this week when everybody's available for deliberation, since it is already 4 o'clock and that wasn't placed on for today. And then the appointment most likely Monday morning.
We done? Anybody got anything else?
I have a couple things, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
My questions have been answered. Thank you to all three of the candidates. I would just like to say there were at least 4 qualified candidates in addition to the ones that sit before us. And it is state statute that sets forth how we will conduct this selection. But there were 4 currently employed candidates within Bonner County. And in addition, whoever takes Mr. Dorman's chair will be running for re-election with those other candidates at the next regular election, which will be in 2024. And some of the things that I've observed from Grant has been a lot of training and a lot of listening. And I'm sad he's leaving, but I'm happy for your family that you are.
So, and the 3 candidates need to understand, in order to take this appointment, running for this office 3.5 years from now is not optional. Yes.
Clerk Roselle confirmed that they would have to run in the next general election.
year and a half.
which would be 2024.
Next year.
So next year you would have to run for the office.
And then they have to run again in 2026 without
Well, you get to campaign twice. How fun is that? So anyway, that's the requirements of accepting the job. So.
I accept the conditions.
And that's,
Nobody else has any other questions? Only 2 people from Realtor, or 3? I always forget when Scott's. Nobody else has questions about?
oh, quiet group. How about
What
the corner?
about current employees?
I don't want to make. Everybody's still sitting upright, so the corner says he got nothing to say.
I did. I actually have a quick question.
Okay. And you'd be getting here just in time for budget.
So my name is Jessie Reinbold, and I just had a quick question. There's been a lot of complaints about collaboration in the past, collaboration with other departments, planning, GIS, which lies under the commissioners, recording, treasurer. There's a lot of, I guess, not things that have to be mended, but things that have to be fixed. So what is your outlook on collaborating with other departments, and why do you feel like that's important?
I would have no difficulty collaborating with other departments in the county, in the state, and the federal level, and private industry. I've done such things before in the past. I'm very open to people's ideas. I'm a good listener. I have no issues in that area.
I would say the key to success in any operation is going to be open communication interdepartmentally. In my past career, I engaged with multiple commands and multiple stakeholders at the table, whether it be asset management, property management, sales, acquisitions, and then looking at the interested parties and trying to get everybody on the same page. Obviously, we're going to have to come up with some type of compromise to make everything work for everybody, but being open-minded, remembering what the goal is, and trying to get the team to work in one direction for common good, I think is paramount to being successful. So I wouldn't have an issue.
So the county government is a family, and a lot of times from the outside, it might not look like that. But our, how do we say, motivation to keep all county officials on the right path is where I have been. In the collaboration, I've done more document requests. Well, not more than necessarily the school board, but the document requests that I have done as an individual have enlightened me to the business of the county. And that includes many of the different departments. And so when we're talking about somebody that can go to bat for the assessor's office and has to deal with those other departments, I have worked with most of those departments in this county. Probably too numerous to name them and names within them, but I do have a fair representation of knowing the county's business.
Thank you. I guess I would probably ask the question of, now that you have all three sat through and you've heard questions more than once, why are you the candidate that the board should select to join a team of professionals? Because they have a huge amount of professionals on their team to lead their team and lay the track. But when you see who your competitors are, you didn't have that dialogue. What makes you the best? What makes you the best candidate? Why should we select you to take Grant's position, as you have watched who your competition is for this particular vote?
Sure. Thank you. And
sometimes that's a nice way to close out. Why we
it
should
is.
think
It is. Yeah. Thank you to both of you. It's been very enlightening and informative, and it sounds like things have been going very well at the assessor office. It's going to be a big role for any of us to fill, depending on who's selected. I would draw upon my past experience running big operations. At the peak of what I was doing, I was responsible for 30,000 military residents. That's a 24/7, 365 job, and with over multiple states. So there's going to be a lot of organization that needs to happen, a lot of teamwork that needs to happen, and the team that is in place, it sounds like they're very well versed in what they do. I think it would be a privilege to be part of that, to help them move forward and support them to the best of my ability. I have a strong business background in real estate, and it would be a privilege to serve the members of this community. I think that's part of our responsibility as citizens, is to try to add value to the community that we live in and call home. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the best candidate, I believe, has a variety of background, can draw on, understand all of, or most of the aspects of the office. In the crisis management part of it, the police officers deal with that on a regular basis. Sometimes we create it, sometimes we just manage it. My positions have been on the road doing the work, not in the office at the administrative level. Mr. Engelhardt, Mr. Brown have that experience over me. And so I recognize that. I think the three of us would be good, viable candidates. I believe as the assessor, we're one of 9 constitutional officers in the county, and that carries with it a voice that could be very meaningful in the near future, depending on where things are going, nationally, internationally. And so I think having somebody that is from a strict conservative viewpoint would benefit the people of the county, especially the independently minded, liberty, freedom-loving people, who are just as much the constituency as the liberal left could be or is. So having an understanding of all those other associations in this office and dealing with them and dealing with the and relating that or having the office staff understand those conditions, I would say I'm the best candidate with the most diverse background actually being employed at this point in time currently.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can't honestly stand here and tell you that I'm the best candidate because I haven't observed each of these gentlemen in the real world situation and see how they perform under stress or dealing with day-to-day operations. But I can tell you that I have years of experience in management, administration, and supervision. I've worked with small to very large units. And did so cooperatively. I've come into units that were in distress and was able to turn those things around. I had, at one point, I was called the grandfather because I had a more compassionate approach to things. I listened a lot. I was concerned about people, and I always have been. I think one of our jobs as people is to encourage the development of others, not just family and friends, but everybody. If you cross somebody's path, you really haven't done what God intended you to do unless you help that person be the best that they can be. So I can't say that I'm better than them. I can say that I'm more than qualified to handle the duties of this position.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. If there's nothing more, I will call it at 4:04 and 45 seconds, and we will adjourn this meeting. And have a blessed day. We will be in touch.